Well, why don't we go ahead and get started? If some other folks come in there, they can just join. I think I know everybody here. I'm Mike Hirschberger, just in case not. We are recording this and going to make it available for others that perhaps want to look at it later. There's kind of two target audiences here, and all are more than welcome. That is those who are going on the trip and those who just are interested and want to see what Turkey was about and the kind of things that we learned. And so welcome to both. I think, so do we have how many are going on the trip? Raise your hand. So I think we just have one. Okay. And so we have really three objectives that we want to accomplish with you. One is we want to just give you some excitement about the things that we learned and saw and just how cool it was. We then want to take that and extrapolate that into what did it mean to us? You know, why was it important? What impact did it have on us and how we think about God and the Bible? And then lastly, just some travel tips for those that are going of things that we learned that we might want to do differently. So that's kind of the lay of the land for the next hour. And so there are going to be four different people presenting. So we'll just turn it over to Linda. Oh, I'll show you. Here, I should do this right. So this is the group of people that went from Kenwood, and Linda's here. John and Janice Ungaru are here. Cindy and John Cordell, and Deb is my wife, as most of you know. And then Susan Marcus and Nick and Connie couldn't make it tonight. So there's a group of us just kind of hanging out. That was in Istanbul, I think, where we on our first night we're still in a little bit of jet lag at that point. So Linda, we'll turn it over to you. And if you have questions, by the way, feel free to just, we have a small group, just go ahead and just, shout them out or anything.
Sure, that would be great. I'm happy to be talking with you about this. This was a wonderful trip, and I'm excited for any of you to go. I am going to talk with you about a place called Hagia Sophia. Its official name is Hagia Sophia Grand Mosque, and it's in Istanbul. It's one of the first sites that we visited. It was constructed originally by the Eastern Roman Empire, and it was dedicated as a church in the year 360. So this has been in existence for a very long time. I understand that construction continued for a while, and it wasn't actually completed until 537. It was then the world's largest interior space, and it's considered to be the epitome of Byzantine architecture, actually changed the history of architecture, and that is because specifically of the dome that you see. It's called a pendentive dome, and that means it's a dome over a square opening, which was very innovative for the time. For about 1,100 years, from 360 to 1453, it served as the Cathedral of Constantinople. But in 1453, the Ottoman Empire sieged the city and took it. So they are Muslim, and so the city became Muslim. And what was a church for 1,100 years became a mosque. And it was after that that the four minarets were added. You'll see the tall, narrow towers. Those are minarets that were added at that time. The site became a museum in 1935, but that lasted only until the year 2020, when it was redesignated as a mosque. Okay, I wanted to tell you that, by the way, so that you'll have some background as to what you're looking at, but we'll move on now. I'll show you some other photos. This is the ceiling, spectacular ceiling inside this structure, and I want you to notice around this dome, the pendentive dome, you'll see 4 figures, one in each corner. I think it's hard to make those out, but they are angels. 3 of the angels have their faces obscured, and only one angel, the one in the lower left, remains unmasked. That's because the Muslims are offended, I guess, by Christian images. And I'm very grateful that they did not destroy the Christian images, rather they masked or draped over them. So that's what they've done here. I don't know why they left one unmasked, but they did, thankfully. This is just more of the interior, more of the sort of alcove areas in here, and you'll see the chandeliers. These chandeliers were added in the 1800s, but they were so well done that they look like they simply belong there, always belong there. And I'll come back to that in a moment. There's another photo of that. I want you to see some of this a little closer. This is a closer view of one of those rounded alcoves, and you'll see that there are white drapes. Those are draping images of Christ. Notice also the black and gold disc shields, one on either side. The one on the left is the image for Islam, I believe. Let me double check. No, take it back. It's the symbol for Allah. The one on the right is the symbol for Muhammad. Here's another photo of the chandelier. I don't know what the diameter is, but they're massive. And so I deliberately took a photo with people standing underneath so that you have a sense of the scale of this. There are some other exceptions to their masking of Christian images. I wanted you to see this. Look specifically at the gold arched part of the wall there, just underneath the ceiling. There's a cross on it, and that one was left unmasked. This is at one of the side entrances, and it's an image of Mary with the infant Jesus, and it looks like 2 visitors bringing gifts. That too is unmasked, and again, I don't know why some of them were left undraped or unmasked, but I'm happy that they did that. Before I bring the Ungarus up, let me mention a couple of other things. This, for those of you who are going or thinking of going, that is the only site where there was a strict dress code. Women must have head coverings, so a scarf would be fine. I think that most of the women, or maybe all of us, were also wearing skirted outfits, but I don't think the skirt is mandatory. I think pants are okay, but in the case of both men and women, they should be long pants, not shorts, no matter how hot it is. Let me see what else. I think that's all I have about this site, and I may have used up my time, so I think I will turn this over to John and Janice.
Thank you. So we'll just piggyback on Linda, because this is a picture of us in the same building that she was just showing you. Yeah, sorry. But again, this is the same building that Linda was just talking about. And on her last picture that she showed you with Mary sitting there, that actually was the emperor's entrance of the coming into the cathedral. And that was the only person that was allowed to see that photo, that image, for over 1,100 years. So it was really just cool to be in that spot and to see, you know, they said in the foyer here when the emperor would meet up with foreign dignitaries, that they actually had lions lining the hallway for the dignitaries to walk through. They had lines next to them. And it was just incredible to think that every emperor of the Byzantine Empire for 1,100 years was crowned right there in that room. So it was really, really neat being a history geek like me. So, down. So this is a picture my wife took when we were sitting in the theater in Ephesus. And one more time, thank you. And this is a better picture of the whole theater. And it was just really exciting to be there. I was raised in the church, and all the time you hear Bible stories, right? But they're actual spots, places in this world that actually exist. And it was so exciting to be there. And while we were there, Pastor David had us read Acts 19, verses 21 to 41, that talks about the riot of Ephesus. And you may remember the story. Demetrius was a silversmith there in that town. He was very upset with the Christians because they were taking his business away, because he was building these images of their goddess. And so he stirred up the whole town into a frenzy, and they filled the stadium with over 20,000 people. And for 2 hours they were screaming, "Great is Artemis of the city of Ephesus." And they had pulled in 3 of Paul's companions, and they were, debating what they were going to do with them, basically. And luckily, the town clerk came in and calmed things down and dismissed them. But being there and seeing that stage, it just, really just brought everything, that story to life for me. So.
We're taking a little different approach. We're skipping around different cities. This is one of my favorite places. It is the Corinth Canal, which is actually technically in Greece. I know you all are going to be going to Turkey, but it connects the Ionian Sea and the Aegean Sea. And we just happened to be pulling into a gas station, and we saw these people crossing the street, and we're like, oh, there's something to see. And so we followed the crowds and went over and looked down, and there was this really cool looking canal that was built around the, instead of having to go around the Isthmus of Corinth, it shortened the trip. The canal was built, it's 4 miles long and 80 feet wide, but it shortens that trip so you don't have to go around the Isthmus. And I only share this picture because this is one of those surprise things that happened along the trip, and it happened several different places where we were on the bus, we were traveling somewhere, we really weren't expecting to see anything, and all of a sudden some really cool spot pops up. This is John and I, our first view of the Mediterranean Sea, and I have to say it was pretty exciting. This is in Antalya. It's a southern port city in Turkey. It served as a significant starting point for Paul's journey to Asia Minor, and likely he was under the guidance of Barnabas when he left this port city. But it was just a beautiful place that we stayed there. You could see the Taurus Mountains off behind us. And so Paul and Barnabas left that city and headed out over the mountains on their way through their journey to spread the gospel. We took a bus trip through the Taurus Mountains, which was pretty exciting. John and I, he's a history buff. I love geography and topography and things like that, and so that was just really cool. But there are some really special moments that'll come along on the trip that just really will touch your heart. And this was one for me when we took the bus tour through those mountains. We were singing hymns. We had someone with us who was designated to lead us in worship sometimes. And it was just a bit of heaven, actually, just to be sitting on a bus with your fellow Christians singing a hymn as you're driving through these mountains that Paul walked through. It gives you goosebumps. It was just fabulous. So this is us having dinner at that resort there in Antalya, and that was one of my favorite times of each day, was getting to have dinner with our group. And you can see Mike is off taking a picture in, in the background. It was hard to get a picture with all of us seated together. I think this is about half our group that we were with. But that resort, I thought when we went to Turkey, it was going to be desert-like, and we were going to be staying in places that were not what I was used to in America. Oh my goodness, this was the most fabulous resort. And the food was excellent, the service was excellent, the views, the sunset. I was like, wow, I thought I'm living like the 1% or something on some of these stays. They weren't all like that, but a couple of the nice hotels that we stayed at. This is another one of those surprise stops that we had on our trip. This is the port of Centria. We pulled over the side of the road. David said we were going to make a stop, and we all look out the window, and we're like, why are we stopping here? There was like really nothing to see. I mean, there was this little inlet, and he's like, oh, this is really special. I've got to show you this. So we all trek out and walk along the water line, and the Port of Centria is actually, it's located a few miles east of ancient Corinth, and this is where Apostle Paul, he spent 18 months in Corinth as part of his second missionary journey, and it's widely assumed that he entrusted Phoebe to deliver his epistle to the Romans, departing from this very port. And so he was telling us that this was a very active port at one time. And just being there, I'm seeing some swimmers off off to the left, and I'm thinking you could see almost some of the marble from the old piers sitting there, and I'm thinking they're swimming in ancient history. And they probably, I don't know, don't even know it, but it was one of those surprise stops, again, that we weren't expecting. And then another surprise stop, which I don't have a picture of, was in Turkey. It was a non-excavated site. It was Colossae. Do y'all remember that? We got there, and there was just this huge hill. And David said, we're going to climb this hill and go to the top. And we're thinking, why? But this is... you could see the marble sticking up from the ground. It was a tough climb, actually. It was one of our first tough climbs, I think. But when we got to the top, beautiful view. And just to think that the people of Colossae lived there, that Paul wrote a letter to them from Rome when he was in prison and was delivered to those folks. So I believe David had said when we were leaving that they had plans to excavate that site. So if you do get to go back to Colossae, you'll have to share with us that went before the progress of the excavation. I would be really interested in that. I know, Mike, you had asked us to share a little bit about what we came away with as far as our spiritual growth from the trip. And I think for me, the depth of learning made me come home with a thirst to read the Bible like I never had before. I mean, I've been a Christian since I was 7 years old, and I know Scripture. I always knew it was true, but when you see these places in person, the affirmation to my faith just soared. And it just made me in awe of God's plan that he had for the early church and spreading the gospel. Did you want to speak to your...
Sure. So for me, as mentioned earlier, it just was, this stories of the Bible came to life for me. And so it was wonderful in that regard. And again, as Janice said, it reaffirmed my faith. I always believed in the Bible, but, just being there and seeing it and experiencing it was wonderful. Sorry. So, I think that was it.
Okay, we're holding our kids.
So,
Okay.
yep. So,
I will turn it over to Debbie. Talk about Laodicea.
It was really hard to decide which city or visit I wanted to talk about, but Laodicea was a really special place. Oh, they're not in order, but okay. It's okay. I'm going to just do some background before I get into the slides anyway. So we know that Paul probably never visited Laodicea, but he had a relationship somehow with the church there, because in his letter to Colossians, he gives greetings to the brothers in Laodicea and to Nympha and the church in her home. And we learned there were a lot of house churches there. And he also instructed them to share their letter with Laodicea. And we learned that Laodicea was a very rich town. It was on a trading route. It was a banking center. It was, they had wool, and they had beautiful black clothing that they made out of the wool and traded and wore. They were known for their pharmaceuticals as well, and they were especially well known for an eye salve. And during the reign of Domitian, which was 81 to 96 AD, who declared himself a god, they were persecuted if they didn't worship Domitian. So we learn more about the church in Laodicea from the book of Revelation, and this letter was written specifically for them. And as you know, John wrote this letter from Patmos, and he was exiled there by Domitian. So I'm just going to read from you from Revelation 4:14, just a few verses to give you a look at this church, and then we'll look at some photos. To the angel of the church in Laodicea write, these are the words of the Amen, the faithful and true witness, the ruler of God's creation. I know your deeds, that you are neither cold nor hot. I wish you were either one or the other. So because you are lukewarm, neither hot nor cold, I am about to spit you out of my mouth. You say, I am rich, I have acquired wealth and do not need a thing. But you do not realize that you are wretched, pitiful, poor, blind, and naked. I counsel you to buy from me gold refined in the fire so you can become rich, and white clothes to wear so you can cover your shameful nakedness, and salve to put on your eyes so you can see. So you see this, the first photo here is taken, there's a large cathedral that we'll have some more pictures of. But this particular picture shows a terracotta pipe that ran into the church. And the interesting thing about Laodicea was that it had aqueducts bringing water into the city, and the water was lukewarm. Corinth, not Corinth, but let's see. I know Hierapolis had warm water, and then another city close to them, I guess I don't have the name of it, but had, it's Colossae, had cold water from springs, but this particular town had the lukewarm water. So this is a diagram of that church of Laodicea. You can see it was quite large. It was the largest, it was actually considered a cathedral, built in the 4th century, and it covers a full city block. They started excavating it in about 2010. It says in the resource that I looked at today that they've completed the excavation, but it seemed like they were still excavating when we were there, so I don't know. But it must have been really beautiful. I mean, what we saw was beautiful, but I can't even imagine what it was like back then. This is a view of the church. There's a structure above it to protect it from the elements, but this is what they've excavated. This was a very interesting baptistry. It's made of marble, and I think you can see it's in the shape of a cross. The circular part is the baptistry. The people who are being baptized would enter, go down the stairs facing from the west and come out facing the east. And people would stand on the sides, on the two sides, to help them in and out. Also in Laodicea, there was some interesting graffiti. This was, I hope you can see, a cross above a menorah. So that depicts that there were both Jews and Christians here, but it's thought that, Jews becoming Christians may have made this graffiti. So from the passage that I read in Revelation, the believers in Laodicea were thought to be rich and arrogant, and they were blind to the fact that they were spiritually wretched and naked, and the only way to spiritual sight was to repent. And we know from this cathedral that they probably did repent because they had a very thriving Christian community, and they had this cathedral. And they've also, in Laodicea, excavated at least 20 smaller home churches or chapels. And I guess that would be my takeaway from reading the Bible, from knowing what John wrote about Laodicea and Revelation, and then to hear about their background, how that, it's all so vivid and true. So I think that's all I have, yeah.
Well, we didn't coordinate completely of who's bringing what slides, so I have a little bit of overlap, but it'll be good. This is Antalya again that Janice had the picture of, and it was just absolutely gorgeous. And there's just I have 1,004 pictures on my phone. If anybody would like to come and look at those, I'd be more than happy to take you through all those. And there's just beauty everywhere that we turn. One of the interesting churches that we visited, and this was outside of Istanbul, was Hagia Irene. And the reason this one was important is this is where the Nicene Creed was first written and codified. And that was in 325 AD is when that happened. And there's, you know and hear about the different creeds that we have. The Apostles' Creed is probably the most one that's recognizable for us as Baptists. But there are a number of them. And the reason that they're so important to the church, and especially the early church, was because there were a lot of people, and it was really Satan, working to undermine what the early church was doing and undermining who Christ was. And all of these creeds go through who Jesus is and what he is and God and the Holy Spirit. And the Nicene Creed was one of the first ones to do that. And that was done at this church. This isn't an exciting picture. It's not an exciting picture, but this is where it actually happened. And they were in this, that was the front of the church that there's not much left of it now, but that's where this actually happened, which is just kind of cool. I want to talk a little bit more about Ephesus. John and Janice touched on it in the theater there. I had the chance to go to Ephesus in somewhere in the mid-90s. I've lost track of the actual year. And when I got back there, they are continuing to do excavations, like just on and on and on. And so much had changed in that time from when I was there in the early 90s to when we went in 23 is when we were there. And they have this massive excavation where they're unearthing this hillside, which was the hillside where there were wealthy people living. And you can see just from this, like the paintings and everything on the walls are still there, and they're still vivid. The colors are just unbelievable. And I'm sure that when those that go this year, there'll be even more things excavated that weren't there when we went. They're just continuing to do that. This was the massive library that was in Ephesus. Huge building. Not much, there's nothing behind it now. It's all gone, but it's just a very, very impressive, impressive building. Okay, yeah. Here, say that in here, Cindy.
They had another library for all the knowledge of books about science and math or whatever, but this was about quality of life library. I might not be putting it right.
This is a very interesting site. It doesn't look like much, but this is the Agora in Ephesus. So this is where the market was. This is where the buying and selling would go. I don't know how many acres this is. It's huge. This is just a small piece of it. The areas that you see on the left would have been covered over. Those would have been like booths, and that's where people would sell things. And as John talked about, the riot that occurred there, this is where those sellers of the statues of Artemis would have been set up. And there would be multiples. They would be selling other stuff there too. There's food, all kinds of things, just like a big open air market. But this is where silversmiths would be, and would be selling these statues of Artemis. Artemis was the main god of the city of Ephesus and had a huge temple outside of town, but the temple is all gone now. There's nothing left of it. But that was what the city of Ephesus was. That was what they stood for. That was their patron saint, if you will. It's not a saint, but you know what I mean. And what's interesting about the Agora is from the one corner of the Agora, it's about 20 yards to the theater. It's like right there. And so it's very easy to imagine the silver makers in here, getting all riled up because they're not selling their statues, and they're going, let's go to the theater, and they did. And so they came storming out of here and did what John described in terms of the 2-hour-long riot that occurred there. Paul wanted to go out and talk to the crowd, and thankfully his people around him convinced him not to do that. It would not have been safe. But this is where that riot kind of started. And as they said already, I would just reemphasize that to go in there and you just sit and you read Acts 19, and it's just very real to sit there and look at and imagine that this is where this happened. To actually be sitting right at that location and see where, how it would have all transpired. I have two. I think my next one is. Yeah. I have two things that are also not in Greece, but are very significant for me and an impact that it had as a significant part of the trip. In the book of Romans, and this is, get my verses right here, Romans 16:20. There's just a one line there that says, Romans was written, as was already mentioned, in Corinth. There's just a sentence there that says that Erastus, the city treasurer, sends his greetings. Well, if you go to Corinth, there's a street that was put in, and that street was put in by Erastus, the city treasurer, and he left his name there on the street so that people would know who it was. And so here we have this guy that's just mentioned in passing kind of in the book of Romans. He's also mentioned in Acts in 19:20 and in 2 Timothy 4:20. So he's not a big figure in the New Testament. But here's something that's outside of the Bible that says, hey, he was here, he lived here. He's the guy that would put this street in. I bet he did that before he became a Christian, but I'm not sure. But it's just so cool. And it makes, as people have already said, it just makes the scriptures come alive when you see that. And you see these things that are referenced there. And this is one of these that there's surprises, but they're not surprises to Pastor David. He knows where these things are. He knows where the thing is in Corinth, and I'm going to talk about that one next too. He knew where this was. He took us right down to it. And, this is what we get when we go with Pastor David and Christine. That's just a nice picture. don't have. Oh, I didn't put the other picture in, but I also had a picture in that Janice talked about of the place where the book of Romans, left. And it was, and again, for me, to just stand there and look at those piers sticking out of the water, and to just stand there and thinking that this is where the book of Romans was sent to the world, from this little spot. And, I was curious, and I did some research. So Phoebe was given the book of Romans to carry. She was also instructed to read it to the Romans when she got there and to interpret it. So she was a very highly regarded lady in the church of Corinth. It would have taken her at least 5 days minimum to sail from that location all around to where she would disembark and go to Rome. But it probably would have been more like 10 days or longer, depending on how many ports of call they stopped at. And it was not. It was a very hazardous journey to go anywhere in the Mediterranean, by boat. We know that Paul, he talks in 2 Corinthians, he was on 3 shipwrecks there. There's another shipwreck in the end of Acts, last chapter of Acts. So we know Paul's been in at least 4 shipwrecks, and that's just Paul. And to have this valuable book that defines God's plan of salvation is in this book. It's such a powerful book for our theology and our faith. Was put on this boat and sent out on the ocean, and obviously it was protected. But it's just overwhelming to me to be able to just think about that spot and think this is where the book of Romans went before, as it was sent out to the world. This was the stadium again. We talked about that already. So I was going to, before we do this, that's why I put that there. I was a placeholder. I forgot why I put that in there. I want to ask if maybe John and Cindy or others would want to have some comments about kind of what the trip meant to them and what impact it had on them. Anybody want to?
Wow. We started, I've looked at the pictures many times on my phone, which I have probably 1,000 of them too. But to see this, I want to go back, guys. I mean, it is unreal. It's the bucket list of bucket list. There's a few other places I want to go, as Janice and John, we were talking about. But this is one of the highlights of your life. And I'm a believer, been a believer for a long time, but until you go and see something and then you can touch it, that does it. And educate yourself. I wish I would have read more before I took the trip. So make sure you read about the places you're going to go, because you're going to see so much. And the group you're going to go with, I would assume they're going with the same tour group. Yeah, unbelievable. But this is a trip of a lifetime, and it'll change your life.
One kind of a side note, I was thinking of when I saw the names of the people from Kenwood that went on that. I thought there were more people from Kenwood, because by the time we were 2 days into the journey, it was like it was our whole church. That we got to know the people. We got to know the people so well. It was, and everybody was in a different place in their journey, and it was just awesome. And all I can do is repeat what everybody else has said. To be there, things that I've read about my whole life, maybe even heard in little kids' Bibles and when I was young, and here we were breathing it and touching it. And then of course David and Christine, they always add these nice little touches, eating these great little quaint places. And I was looking at your placeholder here. I think that's a caper plant. That's one thing I'm really interested in, horticulture. And the tour guide just happened to say, oh, look, this caper plant. Well, I never knew there was a caper plant. And that's where capers come from. When the bloom goes away, I think that's what it is, because it was about when we were there when they pointed it out. And the one other thing is, when I got home, I work with needs, and people were all asking me, how was it? What did you think? What was your favorite? And I said, well, You tell me what you think. Was it Rome? Was it Greece? Was it Italy? Or was it Turkey? And they all said, oh, Rome or Turkey or Greece or whatever. And I said, nope, it was Turkey. I had no idea it was going to be such a beautiful place. Absolutely none. And I could have stayed there. We wouldn't have had to do the rest of it, although it was also all very meaningful, but it was incredible. So, adds to your faith quite a bit.
One more thing that was very interesting on this trip when we go to these hotels, one of them I remember, one of the first we were when we landed in Istanbul. I opened up, it was the middle of getting ready to go to bed, and I opened up the drape, and there's this mosque sitting next to me, the top of it. And about 3 o'clock in the morning, they do their chant. And they do that, how many times a day was it? Many times, and it's weird. It will happen, but it's their belief. Of course, you respect it, that's them. But trip of a lifetime, and you're gonna go with a great group.
Turkey is rich in Christian sites. So the fact that you're not going to Greece or Italy, never mind. I mean, there is so much to see in Turkey. It's fabulous, and it's, in a way, it's heartbreaking to me that it's not a Christian country. I don't know what percentage is Christian, but it's predominantly Muslim. But you will get to see so much, and I'm thrilled for anyone who's going. I have one travel tip to pass along, and that is to consider the AirTag. That's a brand name, and I'm sure there are equivalents, so take a look at those. It's a tag that you put in your bag, and then there's an app on your phone where you can see where your bag is. I think the airlines do a good job, and it's low risk that you'll lose your bag, but if it happens, it's high pain and aggravation, so consider that. Mike, do you have other comments?
I wanted to show you a couple of things that couldn't get into the PowerPoint presentation, and I want to just show a couple of those real quick. Folks have talked about. I got to get the right one here. The importance of the people that you're traveling with. Yeah, this is it. Can we get sound on that for us? No. Okay. He's playing great. What do you call that? Anyway. No. The food is just wonderful. Every place that we went to, it was really great. I have to repeat there. I have another picture of that, but I didn't bring that, yes. Of all those that came in, are there any others that are going on the trip that came in late? Anything? Okay. We were going to do some traveling tips. I think it's still worthwhile if anybody is thinking about going at some point. I'll just do. Oh, let me go back. I do want to wrap up the thing around what's significant and how it impacted me. And this is I stole this from somebody who told me who had gone on an Israel trip. And his description of what these trips are like is it takes the Bible from being read in black and white to being read in color. That is the best description that I have heard of how that impacts you. It just explodes in your face, and it just changes how you read, how you look at the Bible and read it. I would say a couple of points as we'll go briefly through, since there's just one couple going, but I was a little bit nervous about flying Turkish Air going over. You'll probably fly Turkish Air going over because that's where the tour company is headquartered in Turkey. So, and I was a little apprehensive about that. They were fabulous. It's one of the best airlines that I've flown on. They were, no problems there whatsoever. It was really good. And I think in general, and I would say, well, not in general, but just the people that we ran into were all very nice. They were friendly. At no point did I ever feel like I should be in fear for anything. You know, it was just a very nice environment all the way through. Istanbul's a big city, like every big city, so they're going to be, you know, that's going to be there. Let's see. Do you have some more travel tips? I was going to say one of the things I really do literally have 1,004 pictures on my camera, and so if you're going, make sure you've got space on your on your camera that you don't run out. The other most important thing, and I do think it's most important, is have a journal and journal every day, because every day you're going to 2-3 new sites, you know, and it just is overwhelming, you know, and being able to keep track of all that, you really need a journal. Good, Cindy, you got something?
One thing that I learned the day we got there was if you have an iPhone, if you click the little I, you can make notes on your picture. So a lot of my pictures have notes. The only negative is you can't spend as much time looking as a senior because you're trying to take your notes. But
Yeah, and we had essentially we had good connectivity from a phone standpoint the whole trip. You know, I have T-Mobile is what we have, Deb and I have, and we could get on, you know, because we had Wi-Fi calling, you know, we could get on Wi-Fi systems at every hotel just like you could in the States, and I think the bus had Wi-Fi too, if I remember right. Wasn't that true? Yeah, so the bus had Wi-Fi as well, so we could be on the bus and, you know, calling or whatever, or you know, playing games. Hopefully not, but you want to do some more?
All right, I have mine written down here. Some of them were mentioned, so I'll skip those. One of the things the ladies learned early on, we would always go to the bathrooms together, is that some places require you to pay to use the bathroom. So definitely bring coins. Have those in your pocket at all times. We had some crisis moments where some of us ladies were digging in our pockets, helping each other in some emergency situations. I burn easily, so a hat is a must. I wore my hat every day, almost all day long. That helped a lot. And I got hiking sandals because I hate wearing gym shoes. There are a lot of slippery rocks and marble that you're going to be going across. And so just make sure whatever shoe that you pick out, it can grip a slippery surface. That's really important. I did fall and almost gave everyone in the group a heart attack, I think. We were going up to a site on top of a mountain, and these steps were made such that armies that were trying to invade couldn't get up, so they were really all different heights, and and that was on purpose. And so I thought I was watching my feet, and I went down, actually climbing up a hill instead of coming down. But luckily, Cindy said I got up smiling. I was just like, I heard everyone's collective gasp as I went down. But yeah, I also didn't realize I needed a head covering for that one mosque, so I had to buy one outside, which was not a big deal, but they were expensive. Yeah, I think that's my tips. John, I know you had something about shoes too.
Oh, yeah, just shoes, a good pair of shoes. I went and bought walking shoes specifically for the trip, and that was a very good move because I have bad feet to begin with. So having a good pair of shoes is a must. And the basic, just make sure you're drinking your water too, because it's very hot over there and you can get dehydrated very quickly if you're not careful.
And if you take daily medication, like I'm a diabetic, so I had to have, needles and all that kind of stuff with me. It's just make sure you take a picture of all that so that when you go through security, they're going to want to look at the picture of your medications, make sure that was my biggest concern going over there, was that somehow my medication was not going to get through to some foreign country. So that was something that I read up ahead of time, and thankfully we did. And we had that in case I had to go for an emergency or something to the hospital. But thankfully we didn't, and I survived the fall, so.
Do any of you have questions that you might have for us? We got a couple minutes left before.
Huh? Yeah. So David and Scott, season 3 of The Word Revealed at Kenwood podcast is all on Acts. And they do starting in 16, episode 16, I think 14 or 16, somewhere in there. They start with Ephesus, and I mean, anyway, if you want to nerd out a little bit before you go, or now, or before we hear from David here, they're 20 to 25 minutes, but there's a ton of stuff on Acts in there, and all the background on these guys.
Any other questions?
Yeah. What's this class going to be comprised of going forward? I mean,
Yeah, good question. So what David did with us as we were preparing, he did the same thing, and we spent a number of weeks coming, and he's going through kind of each of the sequences of the cities that we visit and what we're going to see, kind of previewing and giving us some pre-look at the things that we're going to be visiting when we get there. So I presume that he's going to do kind of the same thing here in the weeks going forward. So it just kind of laid the groundwork for the trip, is what it was. Well, thank you all for coming. Let me close us in prayer, if I could. Well, Heavenly Father, we are grateful. We are grateful that your word is true, and that it is true even today, and we can go see the evidence of that. Not that we need the evidence, but Lord, it just is exciting to know that what you have given us in the Bible. And so I just thank you for this group that's come. I thank you and pray for those who are going on this trip. We ask that you would watch over and protect them on the way, and that you would give them just a renewed joy in knowing you. And we ask this in Jesus' wonderful name. Amen. Thank you all.